Kia ora and welcome to Business Your Way. I'm Sandra Julian, your host and business transformation coach. This podcast is your go-to for strategies and mindset shifts to grow and scale your service-based business. No more constant hustling, just unstoppable, scalable growth with a soul-aligned essence. Join me in each episode as we uncover the secrets behind successful businesses and provide actionable insights. Let's transform your business your way and unlock the growth that you've been dreaming of. Alrighty, let's dive into this episode. Welcome to episode 125 of Business Your Way. Today we're going to be diving into a topic that is super important and yet often overlooked, or at least never talked about that much. Well, definitely not in my circles anyway. And that is, how do we overcome our fears, or how do we even identify the fears that are holding us back in our life and our business and the things that we want to do for the short amount of time that we're here on earth? I know, deep, right? But this episode was really inspired by my own personal journey recently and the insights that I've gained from a year-long coaching program that I've been part of, that I decided to join because I wanted to be more conscious to my own thoughts and feelings and beliefs. So in this episode, I thought it would be hugely helpful for you to hear my own perspective and how I'm working through the fears that I have, which otherwise no one else would know about because they actually all just go on in my head. Probably very similar to your own fears. They all just go on in your head. So I thought I would explore how we break free from the fear of other people's opinions, the fear of comparison, the fear of self-doubt, and this thing called imposter syndrome, which I am by no means the expert on. But it's one of the fears that we all grapple with. So like I said, this year I embarked on a coaching program. It is a 12-month coaching program, and it has been hugely transformative for me. It's really pushed me to examine my own thoughts and my own beliefs deeply. Where do my beliefs come from? Why do I think that? What happened to me in order to form that belief that I have? And that I have just been unconsciously living my life by and making decisions by. It's been one of the recent activities in this coaching program which has really been eye-opening for me, which is why I thought, let me do a podcast episode on this. Let me be super vulnerable with my podcast listeners so we can normalize talking about our fears, what's holding us back. And the activity that we've been working through in the coaching program has all been about removing the barrier of what other people think about us forever. Now, forever that's the piece for me that was like, gosh, wouldn't that be nice? If I could remove this fear that I have of what other people think about me forever, how freeing would that be? And this fear of what other people think about us, it is one of 4 core fears that many of us have. Because there's actually 4 core fears that most of us grapple with, whether we realize it or not. And these fears can be paralyzing, but when we recognize them, that is our first step to overcoming them or working our way through how we might overcome them. And I actually think this is a evolution. This is an ongoing journey, but the sooner we start, the better our lives will be. So the 4 core fears are FOPO, not to be confused with FOMO, but FOPO is the fear of other people's opinions. So that's the first one. And there are like many books on this topic. The one that comes to mind is The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck by Mark Manson. So I haven't read that book yet, but it's on my to-read list. But again, it's all about, why do we care about what other people think? And how can we live our life without giving a toss about what other people think? So that's core fear number one, FOPO. Then core fear number two is comparison. Number three is self-doubt. And fear number four is imposter syndrome. And like I said, I am no expert on imposter syndrome. But the way that I think about this is imposter syndrome is because we have a thought that we are not good enough. Now, I was recently at the Electrify event, maybe a couple of weeks ago. And this was a one-day event for female founders. Beautiful event, beautiful speakers, learnt so much. It was incredible. But one of those speakers was Anna Kersons. She's the former CPO at Xero and now the director at KiwiBank. And in her presentation, she made a statement and she said to everyone, let's stop talking about imposter syndrome. And this was met by a roaring applause from the audience. Everyone was like, yes, please. And that included me. And I was like, yes, please, let's stop saying to ourselves that we are not good enough. Because if we say it, then we immediately go looking for evidence to prove it right. And our confirmation bias kicks in. Because if we go looking for evidence to prove that right, that we're not good enough, we're going to find that evidence. But what if we went looking for the evidence that proved that we were good enough, that we were good enough to do the thing, that we were good enough to go after our dreams? Whatever the situation is that you find yourself in, go look for the evidence that proves that you are good enough to do that thing. Because that's how confirmation bias works, right? Is it confirms whatever we believe. So if you think you can, you're right. And if you think you can't, you're also right. And that's confirmation bias at its best. So going back to my group coaching program and the exercise that I've been working my way through. And I've been focused on deep diving into the thing about what everyone will think. I mean, just the question alone, who is everyone? Because no one really cares at the end of the day. No one cares about you. No one cares what you're doing. But there's this fear because we are worried about what everyone will think. So first of all, we have to go, who is everyone? And narrow that down to the people that are really playing on our mind. What will my mother think? What will my sister think? What will my brother think? What will my employer think? Like, get really specific around who is that everyone that you are worried about. So it really challenged me to decide that from here on, I'm only going to take some action based on what I think and not what others think, or not what others think of me. And so now every time I get to make a decision and this thought goes, oh, I wonder, what will other people think of me if I do that? I'm like, okay, what will I think of myself if I do that? Because no one else cares, really. And the funny thing is, when I think about what I'm now saying to you, is that if you know me, you might even say that I'm one of those people who never do things based on what other people think. So if you know me and you're listening to this podcast and you're saying, Sandra, you're full of crap because you never do things based on what other people think. You are a very strong, independent woman who just goes after what she wants. You built a company based on what you wanted and how you wanted to do it. And anyone who has worked for me before probably is thinking that I'm really clear around what I want and I don't really care around what others think. And while that may be so, it doesn't mean that I'm not sometimes paralyzed by that thought, what will other people think? Because there's this public persona that I might give off, because by the time I've made my thoughts public, I'm really clear on what I might want to do or where I'm going and how I want it done. But pre getting to that point, I may have been paralyzed, and highly likely that I've been paralyzed by the thought of what will other people think. And I've just really navigated that to get to a point of this is how I will approach it. So I want other people to think this. So it's not that I've not given a toss about what other people think. I've made decisions and decided my path based on how I want other people to think. So now I'm re-examining my thoughts. So instead of making decisions based on how I want other people to think, I'm now just going to base my decisions on what I think, what I want. But as I was pondering on this, I was reflecting on my core communication value. And that value is to always care deeply. So when I'm communicating with somebody, whoever that is, I strive to be clear, concise, and always deliver with a kind heart. And this philosophy guides me in all my interactions, whether it's with team members, with staff, with family, with clients, with acquaintances. I always have that value of care deeply. So if I'm in conversation with you, I am present, I am listening, I'm attentive, and however I respond will be clear, concise, and with a kind heart, because that's important to me. And honestly, life is too short to live in fear of what other people think of you. So even when I have a differing opinion, my aim is to deliver my viewpoint clearly, concisely, and with a kind heart, because my goal isn't to change somebody else's thinking, because neither one of us are necessarily right or wrong. I simply hope to give them something to think about, a different viewpoint to consider. They will either take it on board or they won't. And that's up to them. However they want to live their life, that is up to them. It's also made me examine my own judginess. Prob's not a word, but today it is. Because it's easy for us to judge others. And I see it happening a lot. We judge others in order to make ourselves feel better. And our judginess comes from somebody else being different to us. But who the heck am I to judge somebody else? So I've been examining my own judginess. What they think is actually none of my business. The only judgment I get to make is, do I want to spend less or more time with them? That's the only judgment I get to make of whether I want to spend more time with that person. However they feel, think, do, act, that is up to them. It is their life. They can just go on doing their own thing. It doesn't matter to me. As long as I'm clear around what I want and being able to let go of the fear of what other people think. Because I think this is where I've got to, is no one cares. No one actually cares about what you're doing until they want to judge you because it's affecting them. And that's where I think we should just make the decision to walk away. We don't need to judge anybody. We just actually need to walk away. So if there is one thing that I want you to know, regardless of all of the fears or any fears that you may have, and whether you are conscious to them or not yet, these are the things that I want you to know, is that you matter, your needs matter, your dreams matter, your joy matters, your health matters, your happiness matters, your life matters, your decisions matter, and you matter. You deserve good things, but it requires you to go out and make them happen yourself. There's no white knight in shining armor riding in on a white horse who's going to save you from your fears and then make things happen for you. It is up to you to make things happen for you, the way that you want them to happen, the way that matters for you, and not actually care around what everyone else thinks. And on that note, I just want to say to you, I am here for you to share this journey we're all on called life. I would really like to use my skills, experience, compassion to make your life easier. So don't be afraid to reach out for help if you need it, because you are worth it. No amount of money decides your worth. But if you need support working your way through the fears that are holding you back so you can reach your business goals, live a life that is fully on purpose, the way that you want to live it, which actually means that we have to overcome our fears. So I am doing this work myself, and this is me being super vulnerable on a public platform to normalize that we all have fears, regardless of a public persona or perception that we have about people. Everyone has fears. So if you want a shoulder to lean on and someone to talk about your fears, how do you navigate through them? How do you actually go full on into the business that you want and stop being held back by one of those core fears that I covered earlier? I wanted to jump in here really quickly and ask you for a big favor. If you are loving this podcast and this episode, I would be grateful if you could share it with a friend. Or even better yet, jump over onto Instagram and share it on your stories. Don't forget to tag me. I'm sandrajulian.co. That really is the best way for others to find out about this podcast, and I thank you in advance. Alrighty, back to the episode. So now before we wrap up, as you know, I always like to give you some practical steps. So I want to leave you with a few practical tips to help you overcome those core fears or any fear that you may have. And it starts by acknowledging your fear. The first step to overcoming any fear is to acknowledge it. Write it down, and write down why you're afraid of, what you're afraid of, and why. What is that fear that is holding you back? And why is it holding you back? You'll be surprised once you get and put that on paper, what will come out. So if you write, like no one is going to see it, you're not going to be judged by it. You just have to put it on paper to see it for yourself. I think when we put it on paper, we get over the fear of acknowledging that we have a fear. So that's step one. Step two is to challenge your thoughts. Question the validity of your fear. Are those fears that you've just written down, are they based on fact or are they based on some assumption? Because like I said, sometimes we base our fear on an assumption of what somebody else will think, and yet they don't give a toss because they're too busy worried about themselves. So we have this fear or this assumption of a fear that keeps holding us back. So challenge that thought. Tip number 3 is to focus on your values. Identify your core values and let your value drive your actions rather than the opinions of others driving your actions. So get really clear. Identify what are your core values as an individual and let those values guide the way you live your life, guide the way that you build your business. And when you focus on your values, then you'll get clear on your values. If you don't know what they are, then that would be step one, is identify them. Identify those core values and then focus on those. Tip number 4, take action. Start with small steps. Each action that you take toward your goal will build your confidence. And when we build confidence, the opposing effect is to diminish a fear. And the only way that we can build confidence is to take action. So we sit in fear when we sit in inaction. So the more action we take, the more confidence we build, the more the fear diminishes. That's my favorite. That's my favorite one, is actually take action. And then step number 5 is to seek out support. Like, don't hesitate to reach out to mentors, coaches, or supportive friends who can help you navigate through your fears. The more we normalize talking about this, the more that we can overcome our fears, because we'll get perspective from somebody else. And usually that's somebody else, like, they don't really care because they're too worried about themselves. So I hope those are some really good practical tips. Wherever you are on your journey, whether you are frozen and you're not able to make decisions because one of those core fears are holding you back, sit down, do these 5 steps. So thank you so much for joining me today. If you have found this episode helpful, then please subscribe if you haven't done so already. And then wherever you are listening to this podcast, can I encourage you to rate and leave a review for the podcast? Your feedback helps me reach more listeners and create content that serves you better. So if you took away just one thing from today's episode and you would like more episodes like this, then please rate and review the podcast. Until next time, my friend, take care, continue to dream big, plan well, go after your dreams, and build your business your way. Before you go today, I want to thank you for being here and listening all the way to the end. All the links to this week's episode can be found in the show notes, and you can read a full blog of the episode at sandrajulian.co/podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure you hit that subscribe button and get new episodes as soon as they're released. If you'd like to reach out to me and chat about anything on today's episode or any of the previous episodes on the podcast, then I've got a link in the show notes so you can leave me a voice message or a video message. I really do look forward to hearing from you. Alrighty, have a productive week and I will talk to you again real soon.